Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malou Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Main, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Miss Daly, Miss Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hannah, Mr. Henry Kitts, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, message, Nita, message, Nita Garvey is here, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. William, okay, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright.
Once again, it is my duty as a speaker to welcome you all to the sitting of the House. And I want to especially welcome all visitors joining us in the gallery this evening. There are persons from Carimet at UWI and Immaculate Conception High. We welcome you to the sitting of the House and trust that it will be an excellent experience for you this evening. And I want to give our students the assurance that the experience for them this afternoon will indeed be an excellent experience. I also want to welcome all those joining us online through the various social media platforms. Members, I am asking, we have this afternoon a full agenda and there's a lot of work to be done. You want it?
Madam Speaker?
Yes.
I rise under section 18 of the standing orders to make a personal explanation. And
Which section is that?
Section 18.
Just allow me.
Or standing order 18. And
Hold
I ask your approval and the approval of the House members to proceed.
Just a moment, member. Very well, member. You have my approval. Members of the House, those in favor, I have given the approval to the member to make a personal explanation on the standing order 18. He has my approval as a speaker. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it, member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to members of the House. In my closing budget presentation last week, Madam Speaker, I referred to an earlier publicly recorded comment made by the Leader of the Opposition, Mark Golding, in which he described, or is reported to have described, members of the Jamaica Labour Party, and if I may say the words, the part of my explanation, as damn fools. Taken aback by yet another disparaging and insulting comment, I responded in my presentation that this characterization of members of the Jamaica Labour Party as damn fools did not sound like Marky G, it sounded like Massa Mark. Madam Speaker, Mr. Golding has reportedly apologized for these remarks, which I appreciate. Objections have been raised to my use of the word massa, Madam Speaker, which have largely relied upon a misleading imputation of motive and intent. My remark was meant to draw attention in a light-hearted way to a trend by the opposition leader to explicitly denigrate others with his choice of words without him realizing the need to account for those words. It is that unaccountable display of power that I describe as massa. Now, Madam Speaker, in my explanation, I have to just speak the facts as they have unfolded over the last few days. The PNP and its affiliates have been quick to characterize my reference as racist. The Gleaner has also accused me of using the quote-unquote race card. Others have been similarly critical. These characterizations of my comments are unfortunate and they are untrue. Madam Speaker, I would never countenance, and indeed, I reject race-based politics. This is simply not who I am. Seeking to disqualify someone for political office on the basis of factors such as race or gender or religion is and will always be abhorrent to me. However, Madam Speaker, criticizing someone for how he describes his fellow Jamaicans in a derogatory manner is not racist. In any event, the PNP, the Gleaner, and many others have used or accepted the use of the term massa to describe others in a non-racial way, referring instead to a particular leadership attitude and style based on their power. However, Madam Speaker, the piece that I have in my position does not simply rest on the bed of moral equivalence. It relies on the rock of Jamaican evidence that confirms that the term massa is one, a part of the lexicon of modern Jamaica, two, habitually employed in non-racial ways, and three, always refers to attitudes regarding power relations. Today, Madam Speaker, in today's Jamaica, massa describes a perceived attitude of those with power in relation to others, not a color. It describes a perceived disposition, not a race. And it is an acceptable term of the Jamaican language that frequently appears non-racially in the written and the spoken word. Now, does the term have a root in slavery? Absolutely. But as in all cultures, previously subjugated groups often reclaim and reappropriate words that originated during oppressive times for their own use. In fact, Madam Speaker, according to the Jamaica Patois Dictionary, the primary definition of Big Massa is God Almighty, which is an unquestionable reference to God's power, not to any race or color. Similarly, the lyrics of a popular modern Jamaican gospel song includes the line, Massa God a God. Now, are Jamaican Christians being racist by their use of the word massa in this song? When former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Jamaica in 2018 to meet with 7 CARICOM heads of government right here in Jamaica, the late Honorable Barbara Gludon wrote an article in the Jamaica Observer, which she titled, "Big Massa Passing Through." Was the esteemed Barbara Gludon being racist? Was she referring to Mike Pompeo as a slave master? No. Miss Gludon was referring to her perceptions of the power relations among the parties. Now, Madam Speaker, is the term massa only used to describe power relations involving a white person? Well, let's look at the evidence. No one accused the previous union of being racist in 2009 when their general secretary likened Prime Minister Bruce Golding to a quote-unquote backramasa during the course of wage negotiations. The story appeared in the Gleaner, and there were certainly no editorials about the use of a racial slur. Madam Speaker, former PNP MP Ronnie Thwaites, who once sat in this House, has used the terms bakra and the terms bakramasa on a number of occasions in his columns in the Gleaner. In a 2018 column that was titled and that ended with the words, "Yes, Bakra!" exclamation sign, Reverend Thwaites outlined his reasons for voting against the state of emergency at the time and implied that, in his view, the Holness administration was exhibiting Bakra tendencies. He was referring, Madam Speaker, not to the race of members of the government in power, but to his perception of an attitude and approach of members of the government. Now, Madam Speaker, are these terms, or is this term only used in reference to politicians? No, but it is always referring to an attitude and style of leadership related to power. In 2019, a Gleaner headline read, "Cumberland principal staff at loggerheads over Bakramasa leadership." That was the headline in the Gleaner. The entire criticism in the article was based on an accusation of disrespect through the principal's perceived choice of language and leadership attitude. The article had nothing whatsoever to do with race. Madam Speaker, twice in the past, Gleaner columnist or guest columnist Kevin O'Brien Chang has described, in his view, a previous West Indies cricket board as having a quote-unquote Bakramasa leadership attitude. Nothing there about race or color. Madam Speaker, despite the hullabaloo created by the PNP, which in my view,
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member has invoked Section 18 of the standing orders. And that section is quite explicit that no controversial matter may be brought. And what is at the heart of the minister's statement is indeed a controversy. And this controversy started last week by the minister. And Madam Speaker, it is an abuse of the standing orders if we were to allow this, the minister to continue in this vein. This is indeed a controversial matter.
Madam Speaker, just to respond in interpretation of that very section 18, the issue as it relates to controversial matter relates to whether that matter of controversy was in the House. There was no matter of controversy in the House per se, and what the member is doing is responding appropriately to what Section 18 does ask, that on a matter of word, he can make a statement, and that's what he's doing.
Member, I pause because this matter has been in the public domain to read this section which says, with the leave of the speaker and the indulgence of the House, which we received because I granted leave, we agreed, a member may make a personal explanation, although there be no question before the House. But no controversial matter may be brought forward, nor may any debate arise upon the explanation. And before I go further, I'm asking all members of this House, on either side of the aisle, whenever the speaker is speaking, to observe silence. That is in keeping with the standing orders. So, I wrote from what the minister started by saying, and I'm paraphrasing because I was listening carefully to what came from his mouth. And he says, race-based politics is not something he will ever engage in. And what I understand him to be doing is explaining that his comment was not made to be race connected. And I want to state very clearly, as this speaker, that race-based politics will never be accepted in this House in any form or fashion. I want for all of us and Jamaicans to know that this Parliament has long passed the stage of race-based politics. Those dark days are over. We are a country where our motto is, out of many, one people. And therefore, I am imploring every member of this Parliament on either side of the aisle to refrain from bringing this Parliament and indeed our country into the depths from where we have long emerged. So, the explanation, Minister, I take it it's not a speech. You have explained yourself. And are you at the close? Well, very well. But, Minister, I know you were just finishing, but it is a right of the member to raise a point if he wanted it elucidated, and therefore he so did, and that is what I have. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, before the member rose to his feet, I was making the point that the term massa, as used in Jamaica in modern times, the evidence suggests that it is, one, a part of the modern lexicon of Jamaica, two, habitually employed in non-racial ways, and three, always refers to attitudes regarding power relations. And I was given a number of examples of this, including examples of its usage by former members of this House who sat on the other side. And Madam Speaker, I was at the point of my presentation where I have not spoken on this matter over the past week, and I have to address what has occurred from my point of view. And I'm saying, despite... Yes. Yes. So Madam Speaker, despite the hullabaloo created by the PNP, which in my view, in 2017,
Member, I would ask you to refrain from using that word hullabaloo. I don't think
No
it's
problem at all.
appropriate.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Madam Speaker, what I was about to say is that in 2017, a former member of this House who sat on that side,
Member, we have to follow the standing orders. We are not going to call people by name. Members, hold a minute. We have students in the House. I have implored you that we're going to follow the standing order. So we're not going to call names or anything also. We are going to always refer just to the honorable members and their various persons. Please.
Madam Speaker, in 2017, two former members of this House who sat on the other side appeared in an episode of an online program, Madam Speaker, Probe, and the program was titled Mombasa Grass for Massa Horse. And the Massa reference here was the then Minister of Agriculture, who's a member on this side. The byline, Madam Speaker, to this episode was, in quotes, probing issues of power. For the members, Madam Speaker, who appeared in that program, Massa was not about race. It was about power. And the link to this Massa titled program was retweeted from the official account of the opposition with the encouragement, watch this video. Watch this video. Massa then, Madam Speaker, was not about race. It was about power, and the opposition's official Twitter account recommended that episode and that video. So, Madam Speaker, I see an inconsistency, therefore, to now claim racism when the exact same term that they used applied to a member on this side is now racist when the same term is used on the other side. Madam Speaker, the points that I am making about the inappropriateness of referring to Jamaicans with derogatory labels such as the one I mentioned earlier, damn fool, in addition to little boy and little girl, is a point that opposition of a different vintage would have themselves made emphatically. And therefore, I consider it, Madam Speaker, an irony of ironies. Madam Speaker, there are several Jamaican proverbs that make use of the word massa. Here are a few. Sleep have no massa, which means eventually sleep will overpower you. Massa has, massa grass, which is a proverb about power, control, and entitlement. Another one is patient dog, nyam in massa bone. With patience, you can rise above those who may have authority over you. Are we racist, Madam Speaker, or racially motivated when we invoke these Jamaican proverbs? No. In these proverbs, massa is used non-racially in relation to power and authority. Madam Speaker, despite political competition, Mark Golding and I have always, the opposition leader, the opposition leader and I have always enjoyed a very productive relationship in this and the other house, and a warm and friendly one outside, inclusive of our wives. Some of the interpretations I have seen and listened to are inconsistent with that reality. The reasons are, Madam Speaker, speaking my truth, is that my remarks have been misconstrued, my motives have been misrepresented, and my intentions have been distorted. I regret that some persons may have viewed my remarks as racially motivated. To again be clear, that was never my intention. To apologize, however, Madam Speaker, would be to legitimize what simply is not true. The truth is that massa, in its modern usage, is applied non-racially. Massa Mark as I used it, was not about race. Massa Mark, as I used it, was not about color. Massa is always about an attitude and style regarding power. And that is how I use the term to describe what I saw as disrespectful attitude and language, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I thank you and members of the House for affording me this opportunity.
Madam Speaker, I rise to seek permission under Standing Order number 18 for personal explanation. Could I get a podium, please?
Approving you to use the provision of Standing Order 18. And members, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you also to the members of the House. Madam Speaker, I am the first to admit that the words used by me last Tuesday to rebuff comments of sit down and no say nothing from the government benches were unparliamentary. Madam Speaker, I found the comments unbecoming, including those that also said, but I no lie, him is a descendant of slave masters. I found the comments unbecoming of those referenced by the Minister of Finance as one, unbecoming, and two, I felt them to have been a racial slur used in addressing the leader of the opposition. That was the original point on which I rose. However, the comments that I heard from the benches of the government also increased my anger. It also increased my frustration with the level of incivility and disrespect that I have found far too often coming from that side. It is true that there are times when they also come from this side of the benches as well. We have been asking members in the society, school children, and everyone to look at how they speak to each other. We have been asking them, Madam Speaker, to refrain from abuse. And we have been at pains to indicate that verbal abuse is not only physical, but it is often also verbal. I want you to think with me, Madam Speaker, of two sides who meet almost on a weekly basis, several times sometimes. One side of 14 and another side of 49. I want you to imagine with me, Madam Speaker, what that side of 14 goes through day after day when the other side, at every opportunity they get, seek to quiet them by their numbers and by their abuse. It was in that context, Madam Speaker, when I rose to make a point that I felt very strongly about, and I saw other members belittling the point I was trying to make, and to add insult to injury, also telling me to sit down and not say nothing, that I responded. I have heard and seen, Madam Speaker, in social media and elsewhere, persons attributed that discourse to me either trying to insult the leader of government business or the Speaker of the House. I put it squarely on the record, Madam Speaker, that there was no intent to disrespect neither the leader of government business nor the Speaker of the House. In no way. Madam Speaker, I rose and I retorted based on what was happening at the moment. And I am the first to say that if I was not so provoked and could have contained my temper at the time, I could very easily have said, will you please allow me to make my point undisturbed? And so today, Madam Speaker, I have absolutely no problem, as I started to say last week, that I am willing to withdraw the comments that I made. I do so under no duress, but I do so conscious, Madam Speaker, that the Parliament requires a reset. It requires, Madam Speaker, the Parliament requires a reset because we have found it far too easy to say because an individual is seated and not mic'd, their disrespectful comments should be ignored. I want to make the call, Madam Speaker, for us to review that because it should not be acceptable either, whether it is said seated or it is said while you are on the mic. I believe that fundamentally, how we address each other should be one of respect because every single individual who comes to this house has been sent here by a number of persons who have voted for them and who have asked them to represent them in the house. Madam Speaker, I go further and I also say that references to the hue of anyone's skin or things that might be so construed should also be construed or misconstrued, should also not be part of what we indulge in here in this house. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because I have had the opportunity since last week to speak, in fact, to a number of teachers who have said to me that they have found in their classrooms that it has become less tolerant. And I wasn't sure I understood what they meant. And so I asked, what are you saying? And what they have said to me, Madam Speaker, is that coming out of COVID and coming back into the classroom, they have found greater slurs being heard by their students against the Chinese and against persons of a lighter hue. With that happening in our schools, Madam Speaker, I feel even more strongly than I did the last time around that an individual like myself, and I also say it, Madam Speaker, because I am also aware that the way I wear my hair sometimes is a problem. I know that because members in this house have told me that they could actually introduce me to a hairdresser. So I know that it is an issue in our country. Madam Speaker, the leader of opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, is a Jamaican. Born in Jamaica, schooled in Jamaica, married to a Jamaican, with Jamaican children. His father and himself, they have served the Jamaican people with respect. They have given their life of service, it should be acknowledged and never be torn down.
Member, I am allowing you, like I did the member from the government side, to use Standing Orders 18 as self-explanatory. And you have indicated you have no difficulty and you're not under duress in withdrawing the statement, and I appreciate that, and I think it is the correct thing to do. But this section that we are using, the session having passed, is a session that does not allow us to debate the issue at hand. So that I appreciate what you're saying, but I am guiding you that this is not a subject for debate. I am not prepared for the Parliament to go into that debate under this section.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the guidance. The comments I have made is really simply to put in context how I felt, how I received the racial slurs that I heard, and what provoked me, and what I thought is a way that as a parliament we could move forward, and also the implications of our behavior here and how that's translated outside. So, Madam Speaker, as I close, I want to say that we have to find a new level. We have to rise, I believe, to a new level. And we have to be willing to be bold enough to acknowledge when we have erred. We have to be bold enough not to hide behind words as we make the statement, because there are many others looking at us and expecting us to set an example. Thank you very much.
Members, I have listened to both statements. And I want to say, as I said, and I have said before, and to borrow your own words, there needs to be a reset in this parliament. And there is as of this evening. And when I say reset, I mean specifically the behavior of all members of parliament. This parliament is the highest court of the land. And this parliament has examples of members who have sat in this house for several years, who have had disagreements, who have had differences of views and disagreement with their counterparts. And never before have I ever seen something that has brought this parliament into the level of disrepute that took place last week. I want the reset to be made, that it should never happen again. And indeed, member, one of the things about good parliamentary behavior is in a matter of this nature that is so important. You have addressed me, the member on this side, and I listened carefully. A document was given to me to sign, and I pushed it away. I don't expect, if I'm responding now, that you will be speaking with another member at the same time. That I also find is not parliamentary and not gracious. And to use your own words, we must have a reset. We must abide by the standing orders. We must learn to be respectful of each other. And this speaker does not, and I certainly would not like to preside over a parliament that is like a Sunday school, where you cannot have exchanges. As one member said, we are parliamentarians. We are like on a stage, and with the cut and thrust of democratic politics, there are going to be exchanges. But I ask you to recognize, and I urge every member to read the standing orders, because the standing order says clearly from standing order 40 that when a member is speaking, other members should be heard in silence. When you deliver your speeches, you should do so in English language. When it is that the speaker, and this is not referring to Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, I am referring to the office of the Speaker of this House. Once you get up and you address the Speaker, it is all well and good to say anger and provocation. And it is indeed a defense if you are charged for something that you were provoked. But it certainly does not diminish the offense. And not, as I said for Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, but for the parliament and the decorum, I ask that we observe the rules of parliament. I accept, as the member on this side of the fence said, that race politics is not something that he entertains. And therefore, having been there some years ago, I ask that as a parliament of 2023, we do not return to that. And I want to thank both members, and I want to use the very words of the member who spoke last. We do need a reset. And members, just be reminded that every member of this House has the right to challenge any ruling of any speaker. You do have the right. But if you read your standing orders, it will tell you the parliamentary way to do so. No speaker can just automatically make a ruling that you do not have an avenue to challenge. And I urge you to do so in a parliamentary fashion, because that is your right and you ought to be heard. So I'm encouraging every member of the parliament that if the speaker makes a ruling and you do not use the parliamentary procedures open to us, and do what is necessary so that we may have a debate on the point that is being challenged. That is the correct way. That is the way. And therefore, as a reset, and we have students in the gallery this evening, and it's good for them to understand that disagreements, misunderstandings can take place, but the proper way to deal with these situations is for us to explain properly. So parliamentary behavior, decorum, please call your members by the constituency or refer to the honorable member, because we are all honorable members in this House. I don't want to curtail the friendly sotto voce exchanges between both sides, but I ask members of this parliament to understand we cannot descend to a level which our ancestors and our members of parliament who sat in this House before us has never before descended. I'm asking us not to do it. And I urge us all, in the interest of, as the member said, a reset, to let us move towards the agenda that we have for today. We have a long agenda, and there's much work for us to get through. So, House Leader,
Madam
your
Speaker,
guidance.
on the matter of statements by ministers, and I urge that we do proceed with a level of alacrity because of the extensiveness of the agenda today and the need for us to finish the business of the House. The member from St. James West Central and Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs is slated to make a statement. I now invite you to ask her to make that statement, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader, and I'll give everybody the latitude that I will need as I check quickly to ensure that I am referring to the member from the proper constituency. We all have the latitude to take a little time and look, because we are going to now follow good parliamentary procedure. So the member from St. James West Central, I know. And pardon me before you begin, I did ask the House Leader, I invited him, but I did not indicate, for the purpose of our members and our students and the public at large. We are now on the item on the agenda, statements by ministers. Member?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This ministerial statement is intended to update this Honorable House and the people of Jamaica on the status of the constitutional reform program. Madam Speaker, I am happy to report that the Constitutional Reform Committee has been constituted. The announcement was made by the Prime Minister at a press conference on Wednesday, March 2022 of this year. The Constitutional Reform Committee is a high-level committee with representatives drawn from a diverse cross-section of the society as follows. With myself as chair, co-chair from the Office of the Prime Minister in the person of Ambassador Rocky Meads, the Attorney General of Jamaica, Dr. Derek McCoy, Senator the Honorable Tom Tavares Finson, President of the Senate and Commissioner of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, Senator Ransford Braham, Government Senator, Senator Donna Scott Motley from the Parliamentary Opposition in the Senate, Mr. Anthony Hilton, Parliamentary Opposition here in the House of Representatives, Professor Albert Richard, who is our international constitutional law expert, Dr. the Honorable Lloyd Barnett, our national constitutional law expert, Mr. Hugh Small, consultant counsel and a nominee of the Leader of the Parliamentary Opposition, Dr. David Henry from the wider society, but with focus on the faith-based community, Dr. Nadine Spence from civil society, who is also a social and political commentator, Mrs. Lalita Davis Mattis, Chairman of the National Reparations Commission, Mr. Sujay Boswell, who is there to bridge the generational divide as a youth advisor. The committee will be supported by a committee liaison officer in the person of Mr. Christopher Harper, who is our senior constitutional reform officer at the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Madam Speaker, a secretariat managed by my Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs has been established to provide technical guidance and support to the Constitutional Reform Committee. The officers of the Secretariat are drawn from the Ministry itself, including the Permanent Secretary, the Director of Legal Reform, the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, Senior Constitutional Reform Officer. People from the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, the Attorney General's Chambers, and we are assisted from the Office of the Services Commission with steno writers. Madam Speaker, the Constitutional Reform Committee will be required to serve between March 2023, in fact, commenced on March 1, and all things being equal, no later than the end of the constitutional life of the Parliament. But just to say that the constitutional reform work will go on beyond if we are to achieve the goals of doing a complete overhaul of our constitutional and legal infrastructure. Madam Speaker, the committee has hit the ground running. The inaugural meeting was also convened on Wednesday, March 2022, when the press conference was held at which the Prime Minister announced the members. I'm pleased to also report to the Honourable House that the terms of reference, which will guide the work of the committee and its operations, was finalized at that meeting. I remind that the purpose of the committee is to assist in providing expert guidance and oversight to the government and people of Jamaica during the constitutional reform process, and to, among other things, implement the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, on which consensus remains, while helping to build consensus where it has eroded or is non-existent on other related matters. Madam Speaker, the Constitutional Reform Committee is required to assess how the passage of time has impacted the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform. The recommendations that are contained in the final report, which was submitted to and approved by the Parliament. The committee will advise what fresh perspectives ought to be considered in light of any new national, regional, and international development between then and now, as well as recommend on any necessary modification to update the recommendations for implementation. Committee will also evaluate the said recommendations on the establishment of the Office of President of the Republic of Jamaica and advise on the nature of the presidency, the qualifications and tenure of the president, and the legislative, executive, or ceremonial powers to be exercised by the president as head of state. Committee will also assist in coordinating the required parliamentary cross-aisles and nationwide consultation and collaboration during the various phases of the reform work, and in particular will help to educate the electorate on their role in the referendum process in order to successfully transition Jamaica from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, and for related matters. Committee will generally agree and guide on the sequence of steps to be undertaken to implement the said recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reforms and other recommendations for implementation to achieve the overall reform goal. Madam Speaker, the committee is required to help guide the constitutional reform process throughout all phases of the work, including during the referendum process. And when I say all phases, to culminate in the crafting of a modern new constitution of Jamaica, which reflects an appreciation and understanding of our cultural heritage, our governance challenges, and development aspirations, and which embodies the will of the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, I did indicate to the Honourable House previously that the work will be executed in 3 phases. I reiterate that phase 1 will focus on repatriation of the Constitution of Jamaica, abolition of the constitutional monarchy, establishment of the Republic of Jamaica, and all matters within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which a referendum is required to amend. Phase 2 will review other ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which amendments are desired and required, including the wordings and provisions of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms set out at Chapter 3. Phase 3 will culminate with a full assessment of the nation-state's legal and constitutional infrastructure to facilitate putting together the new Constitution of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, the duration of phase 1 is approximately 2 months, focusing specifically on the transition from a constitutional monarchy to a republic and related matters for the bill for which a referendum is required. It is projected that the bill in respect of this matter will be tabled in the Parliament during the first quarter of the 23-24 legislative year. The other phases will proceed in sequence after the tabling of the bill and will run in parallel to the work to be done to prepare the electorate for the referendum. Madam Speaker, in conducting its review and making its recommendations, the Constitutional Reform Committee is expected to, among other things, examine the provisions of the Order in Council, the Constitution of Jamaica, the Jamaica Independence Act, and identify the provisions that may require amendment or revocation to give effect to the reform recommendations. To advise and make recommendations on the shift from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, including the manner of selection of the head of state, the powers to be exercised by the head of state, and the power dynamics within Jamaica's governance structure. Also, the committee will comparatively examine the processes adopted by other constitutional monarchies that have transitioned to a republic, with consideration being given to any differences in the Constitution of Jamaica. As for phase two, Madam Speaker, there will be a conduct an in-depth review of the provisions of Chapter 3 of the Constitution to clarify the legislative intention and make recommendations for reform of any of its provisions where necessary or advisable. Committee will consult with constitutional law practitioners and as wide a cross-section of the public from whom the committee deems it useful to obtain views on the proposals for reform and the proposed process for transition from a constitutional monarchy to a republic. Madam Speaker, we have noted the concerns reported in the media and those expressed elsewhere about the lawyer-centric nature of the Constitutional Reform Committee. Madam Speaker, I ask everyone to note that constitutional reform work is highly technical and
Member?
complex.
Your time for speaking has expired.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to allow her to complete the presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. The question before the House is that the member's time be extended to allow her to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm grateful for the indulgence. As I was saying, we have noted the concerns reported in the media and those expressed elsewhere about the lawyer-centric nature of the Constitutional Reform Committee. Madam Speaker, I ask everyone to note that constitutional reform work is highly technical and complex, and especially the work to be done in phase one. Although not everyone who is a lawyer by profession is on the committee in that role, I invite those who have questioned the wisdom of having so many lawyers on this committee to consider that lawyers are always helpful in ensuring that all I's are dotted and all T's are crossed, that due process is adhered to in our public consultations, procedural fairness and transparency prevail throughout the entire process. Madam Speaker, lawyers are trained to be especially attentive to the values of a democratic process of constitution making. Madam Speaker, having said that, it is our intention to co-opt stakeholders from various sectors of the society to serve on various subcommittees. And already the public engagement and communication subcommittee has been established, and it will include members of the public and non-lawyer members of the public. Madam Speaker, the next meeting of the committee will be convened tomorrow, Wednesday, March 29. And so far, meetings are scheduled to be held weekly at a minimum up to March 31. Madam Speaker, as we embark on this momentous journey, I commit to providing periodic updates to this Honorable House and to the people of Jamaica on the deliverables of the committee. I thank you.
Permit me to just say a few words as someone who has been privileged to serve on the committee. I want to first of all thank the minister for what is quite obvious, a lot of work and preparation that has gone into this both the establishment and the agenda for the work ahead. If I might, speaking not only for myself, but for the members of the committee that I've had the opportunity to interact with in the brief meeting we had last week, I can report that the members of the committee are highly motivated. They are humbled by the assignment, and they are hopeful that the process will be one that would yield the results that is in the best interest of the Jamaican people. Speaking for the opposition, if I might, and the task that we have, it is to really ensure that the opposition approaches this work in good faith, working with the team, listening, and also providing our inputs. But importantly, we have a constitutional responsibility as well. And we'll discharge that responsibility by ensuring that the rights and freedoms of the Jamaican people are protected. So we approach this assignment with humility and with the knowledge that this is indeed a momentous occasion, and it is consequential for the Jamaican people and our future. And so that imbues our approach to the work. The criticism about it being lawyer-centric, well, I know the minister's response, and I'm sure the minister has heard the criticisms, but I believe that the team that has been assembled is a good team, and we shouldn't make the good the enemy of the best. We shouldn't make the good the enemy of the best, and we need to get on with the work. I'm pleased to note that as the work evolves, there will be the opportunity for more persons who are non-lawyers but can make a contribution, that they'll be incorporated in the process. So I simply say that we view the work as very, very serious, very important work. And I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Report of investigation conducted into the allegations of impropriety and irregularity surrounding the award of a contract regarding the provision of quality surveying services at a property located at 4 Windsor Road, St. Anne's Bay, St. Anne. Ministry paper number 35 of 2023, entitled Annual Report of the All Ireland Jamaica Cane Farmers Association for the year ended September 30, 2018. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statement of the All Ireland Jamaica Cane Farmers Association for the year ended September 30, 2018. Green paper number 2 of 2023, entitled The Government of Jamaica National Natural Disaster Risk Financing Policy. Annual report for the Universal Service Fund for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report for Scientific Research Council for the financial year 2021-2022. Performance audit report on the management of fire prevention activities of the Jamaica Fire Brigade. The Auditor General's Department audit of the effectiveness of Jamaica's institutional framework in enabling a strong and resilient national public health service. The Road Traffic License Duties Amendment Order 2023 and its resolution. The Customs Tariff Revision Amendment Resolution 2023. Report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for St. Catherine Southeastern. The Auditor General's Department certified appropriation accounts for heads 7,000 recurrent for the Office of the Children's Advocate for the years 2015, 2016, and 2016, 2017.
Also, for the years 2017 and 2018. Head 20,056 for Tax Administration Jamaica for the year 2019-2020. Head 26,000B Capital for the Office of the Cabinet for the year 2018-2019. And Head 1600C for the Office of the Cabinet for the year 2020-2021. Head 16,000 recurrent for the Office of the Cabinet for the year 2018-2019 and 2020-2021. Head 8,000 Independent Commission of Investigation for the year 2021-2022 and Head 2,823 recurrent Court of Appeal for the Head 2014-2015, Headed 28,054 for Court Management Services for the year 2017-2018, Head 6,000 for the Office of the Services Commission for the year 2016-2017, Head 26,000, 26,000A, and 26,000B respectively from the Ministry of National Security for the years 2017-2018. For the year 2017-2018. Thank you.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 24th day of March 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Apply a Sum out of the Consolidated Fund to the service of the year ending on the 31st day of March 2024 and to appropriate the sums granted in this session of Parliament was passed in the Honorable Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Swinson, OJ, CD, KC, JP. President of the Senate.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following report, the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for St. Catherine Southeastern.
Notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for St. Catherine Southeastern, which was laid on the table of the House on the 28th day of March 2023, be approved.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move and give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move be it resolved that notwithstanding Standing Orders number 76-1 and in accordance with the Section 64 of the Security Interest in Personal Properties Act 2013, this Honorable House may appoint a select committee comprising the following members. Ms. Carencia Morrison, Mr. Donovan Williams, Mr. Mika Davis, Mr. Dwight Siblis, Mr. Anthony Hilton, and Mr. Julian Robinson, to sit jointly with a similar committee to be appointed by the Honorable Senate to conduct the statutory review of the Act and report its findings to this House. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move. Be it resolved that this Honorable House of Representatives approve the plans and programs being pursued by the government in respect of the ministries which were not included in the debate on the appropriations bill, and further approve the policy projections as announced for the financial year 23 to 24. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Act. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion. The Road Traffic Act. The Road Traffic License Duty Amendment Order 2023 Resolution. Whereas Section 18 of the Road Traffic Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the minister responsible for finance may, after consultation with the minister responsible for transport, by order revoke, increase, reduce, or alter any license duty specified in the third schedule. And whereas by virtue of Section 18 subsection 2 of the Act, an order made under Section 18 subsection 1 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution. And whereas on the 21st day of March 2023, the minister made the Road Traffic License Duty Order 2023. And whereas it is desirable that the Road Traffic License Duty Amendment Order 2023 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honorable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as a Road Traffic License Duty Amendment Order 2023 resolution. The Road Traffic License Duty Amendment Order 2023 laid on the table of the House on the 20th day of March 2023 is hereby affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at the later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion. The Customs Tariff Revision Amendment Resolution 2023. Whereas Section 5, subsection 1 of the Customs Act provides that it shall be lawful for the House of Representatives from time to time by resolution to impose, import, or export duties of customs on any goods whatsoever which may be imported into or exported from the island, and to revoke, reduce, increase, or alter any such duties, and to provide for the importation or exportation of any goods without payment of custom duties thereon. And whereas the House of Representatives, with effect from the first day of January 1973, by resolution entitled the Customs Tariff Revision Resolution 1972, imposed the import customs duty set out in the first schedule to the resolution. And whereas it is desirable to amend the first schedule to the Customs Tariff Revision Resolution in the manner hereinafter appearing, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Customs Tariff Revision Amendment Resolution 2023 and shall be read and construed as one with the Customs Tariff Revision Resolution 1972, hereinafter referred to as the Principal Resolution, and all amendments thereto. With effect from the date of the publication of this resolution in the Gazette, and for a period of 5 years ending on the anniversary date of the publication, the first schedule to the Principal Resolution is amended by deleting the items relating to tariff code number 8704.60.90 and substituting therefore the following. Description of goods: other with only electric motor for propulsion, other with only electric motor for propulsion 3 years and less since the date of manufacture, duty rate 10%. Other with only electric motor for propulsion exceeding 3 years since the date of manufacture, duty rate 30%. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at the later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2023. I did companies first. Oh, so long.
Questions and answers to questions.
Madam Speaker, I now invite the member to ask the question standing in his name.
Madam Speaker, would the Leader of Government Business and the Minister of Tourism please answer the question standing in my name?
Madam Speaker, the question one, and we've asked the Minister to note that the questions were in fact provided for him, the answers ahead of time, so he can follow.
If I might, I have gotten a copy of the answers, but I've also made the observation that in respect of at least one of them, there was a non-answer.
Okay, no.
So he has to read.
No, I mean, I didn't actually require the member to respond to that. I just wanted to make sure that he did have a copy of the answers with him. So the question is, would the minister please state whether the ministry's thrust for greater exports from Jamaica includes medicinal cannabis and cannabis-derived products? If not, why not? Answer. The Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce continues to prioritize the development of competitive industries, and critical focus on is now being given to production and expansion of exports of non-traditional products. As we seek to build robust industries, including medicinal cannabis, the ministry remains committed to growing Jamaican exports from both goods and services sectors. The ministry is placing greater focus on the exploration of new markets for exports of cannabis, expansion of local markets such as medicinal, cultural, and health and wellness tourism, and encouragement of linkage opportunities across the cannabis value chain. The export trust is enhanced by the promulgation of the Dangerous Drugs, Cannabis Import, Exports, Transit, and Transshipment Regulations 2022, which now strengthens Jamaica's ability to engage in export of medicinal cannabis and cannabis byproducts to other states which are signatories to the 1961 Single Convention. However, it must be highlighted that cannabis remains a Schedule I drug under the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Therefore, export opportunities for cannabis must be considered in the current global context of trade in medicinal cannabis, which restricts trade only among signatories to the 1961 Single Convention and focus on growing local industries within the potential market. Question 3. If the answer is yes, then state the number of license permits granted by the Cannabis Licensing Authority to Jamaican companies, entities by export of medicinal cannabis in whatever form. Answer, the CLA has granted 224 export authorizations for the period 2018 to 2022. All licensees are Jamaican companies. Question 4. Would the minister please state how many licenses permits have been granted by the CLA for the export of medicinal cannabis materials, botanical flowers, buds, oils, or other products from Jamaica? In total, for research purposes only, answer, 9. In total, for commercial sale, 215. To Canada, either for transit through or use in Canada, for research purposes only, specifying the date of each license and permit and the quantities specified, and the answer for that is 8. Date issued, description of consignment quantity approved to export. 1. November 26, 2018, dried flour, 0.2 pounds. 2. December 20, 2018, extract, 1,300 kilos. Grams, I'm sorry, grams. Grams, not kilos. Absolutely grams. I couldn't imagine that. I wasn't even thinking of you. 3, October 16, 2019, dried flour, 11 pounds. 4, October 16, 2019, dried flour, 11 pounds. 5, October 29, 2019, dried flour, 0.83 pounds. 6, December 20, 2019, extract, 570 grams. 7, August 21, 2020, dried flour, 350 grams. And 8, August 21, 2020, extract, 575 grams. D, to Canada, either for transit through or use in Canada for commercial sale, specifying the date of each license permit and the quantities specified therein. The answer to that is 1. Date issued, description of consignment, quantity approved to export. 1, May 15, 2020, and 2, exported on July 23rd, 2020, and the extract was 4,536 grams. Question 5. That was a very involved question there. Question 5. Would the minister please state how many licenses, permits have been granted by the CLA for the import of cannabis materials, botanical flowers, buds, oils, tinctures, and other products, for research purposes only, specifying the source of countries and the cannabis material to be imported, the companies to which the licenses, permits have been granted, and the date of grants and quantities specified therein? Answer. The CLA has granted 2 import authorizations for market research. Only one was used for the approximate weight of 44 pounds in 5 retail outlets. Date issued, date expired, purpose to import, approximate weight, and name of strain, form of import, country of origin, licensees. December 18, 2022, December 22, 23, and medical 331 pounds. Madam Speaker, it is to be noted here that the Tom Ford Pink Kush, dried flour, Canada, Canavera, those are the companies that it went to. December 8, 2022, 31 December 2022, those 2 dates, 44 pounds of medical cannabis was utilized. And again, it's only was used for tranquil, elephantizer, dried flour, and that is Canada, Canavera. I think that when further explanations are given by the Minister of State for Industry and Commerce, he will elaborate on those. Question 6. Would the minister please state how many license permits have been granted by the CLA for the import of cannabis materials for commercial sale, specifying the source countries of the cannabis material to be imported, the companies to which the licenses, permits have been granted, and the dates and grants and quantities specified therein? Now, these questions have the same form, and the answers I'm giving in the same manner. The CLA has granted 2 import authorizations for commercial sale. Date issued, date expired, purpose of imports, approximate weight, number of strain from imports, country origin licenses. And June 3rd, 2020, second was February 21st, 2021, and to the United States of America. Specifics in terms of it now scientific, 1 kilo, then this time is 1 kilogram, yes. And the broad spectrum CBD oil, and I think there's Jacana Therapeutics Limited. I think you understand that very well. Therapeutic purposes, 60 clones, Flower United States of America, and then Gorilla Glue, Twisted Grape, and Booba Hash Plant, Dried Itopia Life Limited. Question 7. If the CLA has granted any licenses, permits for the import of cannabis into Jamaica, what is the policy justification for the CLA having exercised its regulatory discretion to grant licenses, permits for the importation, no cap, of cannabis into Jamaica in the quantities stated in such licenses, permits? The Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act 2015 under Section 9A and 7D established the CLA and imbued it with the authority to grant authorizations for importation and exportation of cannabis. In light of that direction granted under the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act 2015, the Dangerous Drugs Cannabis Import, Export, Transit, and Transshipment Regulations 2022 was promulgated to give effect to that authorization. To complement the regulation, the CLA has commenced work on detailed administrative guidelines to guide considerations of applications for import that will ensure a balance between the need for the import and the development of local medicinal cannabis industry. Question 8. Does the existing trade agreement between Jamaica and Canada require free, unrestricted trade in regulated products such as cannabis? The answer: Jamaica is currently a signatory to CARIBCAN, which is a non-reciprocal agreement which allows all Commonwealth Caribbean countries to export goods free to Canada, with a few exclusions. This agreement does not explicitly refer to the trade in cannabis. Number 9. Does the existing trade agreements between Jamaica and Canada allow for reciprocal trade of regulated products such as cannabis? Answer: approximately 6% of Jamaica's export to Canada now enters duty-free under the CARIBCAN agreement. CARIBCAN is non-reciprocal for duty-free access. However, Canada and Jamaica maintain a liberal trade regime for the import and export of regulated products. The CARIBCAN agreement does not explicitly reference the trade of regulated products such as cannabis. However, the import and export provisions for cannabis in Canada is governed by Canada's international drug treaty obligations. Canada is a party to the Single Convention on Narcotic Drug 1961 as amended by the 1972 Protocol, the Convention on Psychotropic Substances 1971, and the United Nations Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances 1988. Health Canada maintains control over the control and movement of cannabis in a manner consistent with these international drug control conventions. The import and export of cannabis, therefore, may only be authorized for medical and scientific purposes and within the parameters set by the international drug conventions. Importing or exporting cannabis for medical or scientific purposes requires a permit from the Health Canada for each shipment. Health Canada's general policy is to issue imports or export permits only in limited circumstances, such as importing starting materials, example seeds and plants, for a new license holder. exporting cannabis products to another country that has a legal regime for access to cannabis for medical purposes. Or 3, importing or exporting small quantities of cannabis for scientific purposes, example, research or testing. Question 10, 11, and 12. Question, was any request made by the Plant Quarantine and Produce Inspection Branch of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries for the issuance of a permit to the CLA or any company for the importation of medical cannabis from Canada or any purpose and in any form or quantity within the last year or so? If the answer to part 10 is in the affirmative, was such request granted, authorized by the PBPIB, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, or on what date? If the answer to part 10 is in the negative, why was the request not granted or authorized? Answer, pursuant to regulations 4.3 of the Dangerous Drugs, Cannabis Import, Export, Transit, and Transshipment Regulations 2022, an applicant for an import permit shall submit to the authority a complete application form supported with 1, the relevant application fee, 2, the export authorization issued by the competent authority in the exporting country, 3, a copy of the relevant airway bill or bill of lading, as the case may be, 4, the phytosanitary certificate issued by the competent authority in the exporting country, the Plant Quarantine Act, 5, the current tax compliance certificate in respect of applicants, and 6, such other documents as the authority may require for the purpose of determining the application. So, given the interagency jurisdictional responsibility for import of cannabis, we are implementing the PQPI import phytosanitary permits for all cannabis imports. Those, Madam Speaker, constitute the full range of answers to the very extended sets of questions put forward by the member.
Minister, I wonder, I know you were answering on behalf of your colleague who sits in another place, but the Minister of State is here. And I wonder if the Minister of State could respond to some follow-up question. You can.
Just to let you know that, yes, the Minister of State is well equipped to handle the follow-up questions.
I'm happy to hear. So, Minister, the question 10, 11, and 12, let me start backwards. That asks specifically if within the year any request was made of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in the Plant and Quarantine Division. That was the question specifically. The answer is really an evasive one. It doesn't answer the question, which is, was there an application, was such an application made within the year for the importation of any quantity of cannabis in any form from Canada? It doesn't answer the question at all. It simply acknowledges that the requirement is being applied in question 6, but it doesn't say whether that request was made for the importation of cannabis from Canada during that year. Is that the best answer to the question?
Thank you very much, member from West St. Andrew, for the questions. We appreciate the fact that this subject matter has brought to the fore a discussion on an important product that we have always had in Jamaica, that we have had over the years, amplified by our culture, amplified by a particular community in Jamaica, the Rastafarian community, and one that has over time showed that the benefits that was always indicated by this particular community is one the world has now recognized. In response to your question, there are regulatory requirements generally for materials to enter Jamaica. There is the Ministry of Agriculture, the Plant Quarantine Division in particular. We will have the FSP, Food Protection and Storage Division from the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, as FSPID, that deal with another aspect of importation in Jamaica. As it regards to cannabis, as with any material of plant nature, the rules would be of such that the requirements calls for and would have been understood that the requirements are as it is. The CLA, as you know, issues authorization, and these authorizations would be based on the exporting country satisfying the requirements to be exported to, or in this case, to be imported into Jamaica. And those requirements are clearly set out in the authorization document, which includes phytosanitary certificate. So in its permit authorization, the CLA would have satisfied themselves that the phytosanitary certificate would have been issued by the exporting country. And that phytosanitary certificate would be one of the documents that would be assessed as far as the importation into Jamaica is concerned. Now, we have recognized that there are gaps within this particular industry, and those gaps is the gaps that we continue to, as it evolves, and as you know, it's an evolving industry, one where we have to ensure that all agencies, especially our border regulatory agencies, work in tandem to ensure that all requirements are in fact met for importation.
Minister, is that a yes or no? Was the application made and granted for the importation of the cannabis that from Canada that is the source of the discussion?
Member, as far as the information that I have is that the phytosanitary requirements was in fact met, and that the border regulatory agencies would have conducted their due diligence as far as importation is concerned. However, again, I repeat, I concede that there is a gap, which is one that at the end of this of question 12 said, given the interagency jurisdictional responsibility of imports, we are implementing PQPI import phytosanitary permits for all cannabis products. The point is, member, that, and I'm repeating myself, that obviously a gap exists, and it's a gap that we are ensuring that all our border regulatory agencies conform.
But Minister, that speaks to the future, correct? That speaks to the future, and I'm happy to hear that in the future that will be applied. My question, though, and you still haven't answered, is that in this particular respect, was a certificate issued? And if it is it available?
From my understanding, member, a certificate was not issued from here. The certificate that was issued was the phytosanitary certificate from the importing country. Yes.
No, please be clear. The phytosanitary certificate that was issued from the exporting country, but none was issued from the importing country, which is Jamaica. Am I correct?
From my understanding, member, I am not aware that one was issued by Jamaica on its arrival. And for the third time, I'm mentioning the fact that obviously, because the industry is unfolding at such a rapid rate, I mean, the member from South St. Andrew was basically one of the architects in its initial form when he was at the Ministry of Justice, I believe. And we have recognized that there are some gaps in the legislation itself as it relates to interagency jurisdictional responsibility. And those are the gaps, member, that we seek to close.
So I take it the answer is no, and unless I'm wrong, and you can contradict me, my understanding is that the answer is no. No certificate exists. One was not issued, nor was it requested. Is that so? Yes or no?
But as I said, member, I am not aware that there was one for the importing side, but from the exporting country, a sanitary certificate was in fact issued. And again, I say that we recognize that there are gaps within the legislation and the interagency jurisdiction as far as border regulatory agencies performing their duties in a very cohesive manner in this particular industry that is unfolding at a rapid rate. We do concede that there are gaps within the legislation.
So Minister, will you be issuing any more authorization without the certificate?
No, well, authorization are not issued by me. Authorization are issued by the CLA. So that's a question we'll have to ask the CLA.
The CLA, will the CLA be issuing any more authorization without the certification?
Well,
The phytosanitary
that is
certification.
thank you for your question, member. Of course, that answer I will see from the CLA.
And you'll update the House on that when you get the answer? Will you update the House when you get the answer?
Was that a question, member? Was that a question I missed? I was speaking to you.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
And did you answer?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. I have some questions related to the responses given to questions 4 and 5. I note that in the answer to question 4, it is said that 9 permits were given for export to Canada for research purposes only. And in terms of quantities that were permitted to be exported to Canada for research purposes only, they range from 350 grams, 575 grams, 570 grams, 0.83 of 1 pound, 1,300 grams, which is about, there's 1.3 kilograms, that's about what? 3 pounds, 0.2 pounds, and then there were 2 for 11 pounds for dried flour. In relation to the answer to question 5, on the other hand, which was a question about whether permits have been granted for the import into Jamaica of cannabis, ganja-related products for research purposes only. We're told that CLA has granted 2 import authorizations for market research. Market research. You know, this is not really what certainly I would have expected to be covered by research and development licensing, which is to do with scientific research on the plant and so on. So authorizations for market research, and then one of them was for 44 pounds, and then it says 5 permitted. And I'm asking you, please, to look at this very carefully and demand very clear explanations from the CLA as to why they would do this and how they intend to move forward in relation to allowing the importation of ganja into the country. It is a small industry in the sense of the regulated players are struggling with all kinds of challenges. You're very familiar with them. We're trying to build an industry which has tremendous potential, as you know. Allowing large volume imports for market research to be distributed through retail outlets by Jamaican licensees is really not the purpose for which research permits are allowed. And I think this is, it has come to light and it needs to be nipped in the bud, pun intended. Yes. Yes, and it is going to be very important that you give us an update, maybe through a ministerial statement, when you've had a chance to really look at what they're doing in this area and what assurances you can give the country that this kind of thing won't happen again. I noticed in the response to question 7, the final paragraph says that the CLA has commenced work on detailed administrative guidelines to guide consideration of applications for import that will ensure a balance between the need for the import, whatever that might be, and the development of the local medicinal cannabis industry. The local industry's development is going to be thwarted or undermined by large volumes of dumped cannabis from markets where there's excess supply, which is the current situation in Canada. And the purpose of the import regime in relation to cannabis needs to be carefully considered, where the idea was that it would be for specific cases of medicinal need, where medical need for persons who had a particular condition, and there was not the strain available here, where somebody had some type of cancer or some other serious condition for which there was a basis for allowing. It was not to allow imports to undermine the local industry. So I'm asking you, please, with that principle embedded in the answer to question 7, that you look at this going forward, and then when you're ready, bring it to us so we can understand what the policy is going to be going forward. Because this issue has caused, as you're aware, considerable consternation in the country, considerable consternation amongst participants in the lawful ganja industry, and indeed persons interested in industry, even if they're not investors. So I hope to hear more from you in due course, and I look forward to it because it's a very important thing, and this has arisen. Let us nip it in the bud. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, Speaker, may I ask? Speaker. Thank you very much, member from South St. Andrew, for your comments. And your comments are in fact noted. You'd have also noticed, member, that the Prime Minister, in his closing of the debate, mentioned the views that he had and how strongly he felt about this particular. So the fact that the Prime Minister has openly said it, it is in similar similar understanding that you have. We do appreciate the fact that it's an industry that has tremendous potential, and we need to stop using the word of potential and actually derive the benefits from it. We are also very cognizant, as you did then and now, that the smaller players are really the engine of this industry. And we're devising several programs as a follow-up to a program that was done before, which is the 81, the 82, and several other programs that are now going through the approval stages to ensure that the smaller farmers are in fact included in this. We acknowledge that the CLA, of course, is independent of the minister. However, the policies that is enunciated by the government for this particular industry is one that must be cohesive enough and understanding of the real needs of the persons who would have fought for this all these years, the Rastafarians, etc. But also that the Jamaican product is one that is known world over. I mean, just this afternoon, I'm actually visiting this opening of a dispensary here, again, to highlight the importance of this industry to Jamaica. Thank you.
Minister, may I ask you finally, who is the current chairman of the CLA, and how many chairmen have you had over the last 3 years? How many chairmen have you had over the last 3 years? Who is the current chairman?
Member, the current chairman is Christopher McPherson, and over the last 3 years, we have had one chairman and two interim chairmen. Interim.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice.
No, you have some
I
questions.
beg, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry.
Yes. Madam Speaker, this is on the question. I beg to give notice at the end of 21 days, I wish to ask the Minister of Finance the following question.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Minister of Education and Youth the following question.
I think you have another question on the order. Do you?
Yes. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Minister, the Prime Minister, and Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation the following question.
Motions that be. Oh, member from St. Andrew Northwest, Western, St. Andrew Western. There's a question on the paper for St. Andrew Western.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation the following question, standing in my name.
And now, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House, first obtained.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023.
Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time.
The Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023 read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Act 2023.
Amendment Act 2023 for it to be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the bill shortly entitled the Companies Act 2023 be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Act 2023 read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that the second reading of the bill.
No,
Sorry.
there is the financial, the administration. And
I
audit.
further beg to give notice at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill and to take it through its concluding stages. Madam Speaker, while we're at presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, I'd like to now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Audit Amendment Act 2023.
For the House is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2023 read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill, and I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Members, the question is for the standing orders to be suspended to enable the minister to take the second reading of the bill, notice of which he gave earlier, and also for him to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, the matter of public business, I just rise to further indicate to the House that it is an extended public business which will involve a number of bills to be taken this evening. And in my earlier comment, I made a point that we do speak and make hay while the sun shines and in fact get
House
through.
Leader, could you, just for clarity and for us to move smoothly, where are we starting this afternoon? Because there are a number of...
No, firstly we will take the member for the ethics committee, and then we will do the electronic, and then we'll move through with the Minister of Finance taking the two measures. Ethics first, then we will do the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023, and then the Minister of Finance will take the other two bills.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, the question before the House is the standing orders be suspended to allow the member to take the motion, notice of which she gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the motion tabled, taking the report from the Ethics Committee for exemption on behalf of MP for St. Catherine Southeastern, be approved.
Members, the question before the House is that the motion be now approved. Those in favor? Those against? The motion is approved. Thank you, Member.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to allow me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
House is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the member to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the motion that I gave earlier with regards to the committee established for the review of the security interests in personal properties be approved.
Question before the House is that the motion brought by the House Leader be now approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is approved.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of a bill entitled the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023, notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to take it through all its concluding stages.
The question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the second reading of the bill, notice of which he gave earlier, and also for him to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The proposed amendment, Madam Speaker, to the Electronic Transactions Act is one of the ways that the government is using and proposing to maximize operational efficiencies and improve productivity levels in the island's courts through the introduction of the automatic rollout of advanced operational processes that are commonplace features in any modernized justice system. The proposed adjustment to the identified legislation would provide the required enabling environment to bring Jamaica's court system in line with approaches currently being employed in other jurisdictions that are geared towards reducing bureaucratic impediments that impact the achievement of operational efficiencies. A foundational activity in support of this push, Madam Speaker, to increase efficiency would be the utilization of electronic signatures as a means of authenticating warrants generated electronically in the justice system and in the recognition of electronic documents, records, as records of the court. It must be noted, Madam Speaker, that an electronic record is regarded as any information created, used, and retained in a form that only a computer can process, such as an email, text message, and records that exist on portable media. The court system in Jamaica, Madam Speaker, is currently highly paper-based, and adjustments are required legislatively to facilitate the acceptance of electronic records in the court system. Madam Speaker, the Chief Justice in his 2022 first quarter statistics report noted about the traffic courts that significant reforms in areas such as the warrant management process are required to improve productivity. Indeed, Madam Speaker, 70% of the total annual caseload in the parish court system is comprised of traffic matters. During this quarter, Madam Speaker, 60,096 new cases were filed in the traffic division of the parish courts across the island, of which only 12,191, or just 20%, Madam Speaker, were disposed of in that quarter, with the vast majority of these cases, Madam Speaker, requiring the issuance of a warrant. The sheer volume of the documents required creates an unwieldy and untenable situation in the island's parish courts, as the demand for the timely execution of the process outstrips the available human resource capacity. Madam Speaker, we have a situation, where every week, 3,000 approximately warrants need to be issued across the parish courts. In Kingston and St. Andrew alone, in excess of 1,500. Just consider the paper-based issuing of a warrant. They have to be written up for each ticket, signed by the judge before it is available for execution. And that is why, Madam Speaker, not many warrants have been issued, because by the time the judge gets off the bench, it's 4 o'clock, and on one occasion, they tried, and they went until 10 o'clock. They had over 1,000 warrants, and they did just over 200. So it's just not possible. So, Madam Speaker, the existing process used in the courts to generate warrants is not sufficiently expedient to meet its current needs and requires an appropriate and immediate fix, namely the ability for judges to utilize an electronic signature in the issuance of warrants. Madam Speaker, for the record, between February the 1st this year, 2023, and March the 27th, 2023, 66,428 tickets have been issued for the violations of the Road Traffic Act 2018. Of this number, Madam Speaker, payment was made for 27,617 at the various tax collectorates across the island. 246 were settled in the courts, and 5,511 will likely require the issuance of warrants in the short term. When taken in the context, Madam Speaker, for the fact that the remaining 33,054 matters generated over the last 55 days have still not been brought before the courts, along with the 981,921 unpaid tickets issued up to January the 31st, 2023, the monumental task facing the court, if reliance is placed on warrants issued by handwriting, cannot be discounted. Madam Speaker, let me emphasize, the government, this parliament, every single law-abiding citizen would like order and discipline on the road. We'll be very happy if no tickets are issued. But the truth of the matter, Madam Speaker, you have motorists who speed, motorists who break traffic lights, motorists who disobey the rules of the court, of the roads. And so, Madam Speaker, with the new Traffic Act since the 1st of February, we are sending the warning now to motorists. Stop overburdening the courts. If you get a ticket and it is justified, pay online or pay at the tax collectorate. If you don't pay and you come to court, or you fail to, and when you come to court, you're burdening the court. But if you don't come to court, what we are doing today, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that in a matter of days or a couple of weeks, a warrant will be issued for you. So, Madam Speaker, it is on the basis that the amendments to this legislation now mentioned previously been proposed to assist in increasing the throughput and, by extension, productivity levels in the islands courts using the available technologies. Madam Speaker, it is not a novel position. In many jurisdictions in the United States, Rwanda and Scotland facilitate the use of electronic signatures that are affixed through a secure process approved by the court and governed by legislation. Madam Speaker, the electronic signature is then represented as a digitized image of the handwritten signature, and the document signed in this manner usually carry the same force and effect as if the judge had affixed his or her signature to a paper copy of the document. Madam Speaker, this Parliament should recognize that there are many courts that you don't see paper. Chief Justice and myself led a team to Rwanda. You go into the courts, there's not one piece of paper. Everything is electronically. And we intend, Madam Speaker, to start in this fiscal year, or the coming fiscal year, to start a process that the courts will become paperless. It will be digitized, and every attorney, we are going to have an integrated case management system where from the police apprehend someone, gets a statement, that statement moves to the DPP, from the DPP to defense counsel, to the accused, to the courts, and in the courts, Madam Speaker, everything is being done electronically. So the idea is that we will become paperless. And Madam Speaker, when I sat where you were, 2010, I begged for this house to become paperless. So the amount of paper we are now seeing on the desk, eventually, Madam Speaker, the order of business questions, we really must move for it to be paperless. A lot of documents at the end of Parliament are just wasted. They're thrown away. And so, Madam Speaker, eventually, not too long, we must get to a paperless system. Our ultimate goal, Madam Speaker, is to maximize efficiency in the processes used by the courts without compromising the integrity and safety that currently exists where warrants are signed by hand. For the use of electronic signatures to be accepted, used, and trusted by the various stakeholders, specific safeguards will be introduced in order to prevent unauthorized use of the electronic versions of the signatures of the judges in the parish courts. The security risk, Madam Speaker, associated with the use of electronic signatures, such as fraud, through the unauthorized use of an electronic signature, would be mitigated through the establishment and maintenance of a stable and controlled environment supported by the requisite safeguards and fit-for-purpose infrastructure, as well as the training of the users interfacing directly with the system. These efforts, Madam Speaker, will increase the levels of trust and acceptance in this process by stakeholders in the justice system. Madam Speaker, it is with all of this in mind that I commit this bill, which seeks to amend the Electronic Transaction Act and consequently amend the Justices of the Peace Jurisdiction Act to the House for approval. So, Madam Speaker, the bill is before us, and I just refer members. The first clause 1 is merely the enactment and entitlement bill clause, and clause 2, Madam Speaker, the bill proposes an amendment to section 6 of the Principal Act to make it abundantly clear that no provision of the Act or any other law shall be construed as precluding a court from giving, receiving, or keeping any document, record, or other information in electronic form. This will, however, Madam Speaker, be subject to rules of the court and the provisions of the first schedule of the Act. Clause 3 of the bill proposes an amendment to the first schedule to include circumstances in which the Electronic Transactions Act could apply to court proceedings or procedures. And clause 4, Madam Speaker, consequentially amends the Justice of the Peace Jurisdiction Act in respect of the terminology used in issuing of warrants so that the terminology is compatible with the language used in the Electronic Transactions Act. So, Madam Speaker, in the Justice of the Peace Act, it speaks to under my hand, under my hand. What this bill will now do, Madam Speaker, instead of saying under my hand, it now in writing. Remove it and put in writing. And that is compatible with an electronic record or signature. So, Madam Speaker, with the passage of this bill, and hopefully when it goes to the Senate, we hope in due course that the process of the court will become easier. We have a TTMS system, Madam Speaker, traffic management system, which is already online. I'm aware that all the outstanding traffic tickets have been posted. So anyone who has a traffic ticket and who has failed to pay, it will be online. What will happen soon, Madam Speaker, if they fail to pay and an electronic warrant is issued, that may well be online, so that not only would the motorist know that a warrant is out for his or her arrest, but the police officer who stops a motorist may well be able to see that a warrant is out for that person. And if the police officer has it on his cell phone, he may well be able to serve it and arrest the person and take the person to court, so that that person can either have the fines paid or the judge can do as he or she sees fit with respect to the motorist who has violated the Road Traffic Act and failed to pay the penalty. So, Madam Speaker, this, colleagues in the House, is meant to bring the traffic courts into the modern age. And I seek your approval and support.
Member from St. Andrews Southern.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, thank you for bringing the Electronic Transactions Amendment Act 2023 here. It's a short bill, and I understand you want to table it and pass it today, and we have no objection to that. I am a bit confused as to why the bill is being brought in your name as Minister of Justice, because the Electronic Transactions Act, I believe, comes under the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, or Commerce. So while I can understand why you would pilot it here, because that minister is not in this House, I'd have thought the bill would have come in that minister's name, because the Principal Act comes under his portfolio assignment. I've never seen it done this way. But I don't propose to make anything more of that, other than to note that it's a bit odd. And I'm not sure why it was done that way. The essence of it seems to be essentially to allow court documents, civil or criminal, to be dealt with electronically in accordance with the Electronic Transactions Act. And that the exclusion which existed in the first schedule to that act before in relation to procedures governed by the civil procedure rules or other rules of court made under any law will no longer apply. So going forward, those rules can now provide how service is to be done and other things, that filing is to be done electronically. And so it kind of opens the door for the court rules now to formulate how electronic management of documents is to take place. And I fully endorse that and hope that we can see, the increased use of digitization in relation to the court system. We have a real problem with court records, which are not yet fully digitized. and the space it takes up to hold those records in parish courts around the island, the Supreme Court itself. Attempts have been made to have those documents scanned and then kept in an electronic database so that they're accessible and so that the physical document no longer has to be held in court. But I don't know, that is a very tedious process. Some of these records are very old, they're in poor condition, and so on. But this is something which is uncontroversial, certainly as regards the civil side of it. As regards the criminal side of it, I'm not sure. You said some things in your opening. Maybe you can explain a little further when you close the debate in relation to how it will work. So, for example, if an electronic warrant is issued because a ticket isn't paid by the prescribed date, how will the motorist be aware that the electronic warrant has been issued? Yeah, how will they know? Is it because presumably when the ticket is issued, it's issued to that individual, they can go on Tax Jamaica online and pay it. There may be, I don't know if there's any other portal, but certainly that one, you can go on and pay it if you have access to electronic payments through a credit or debit card, for example. But if the court subsequently issues an electronic warrant, it's not clear to me how the motorist will become aware of that. I don't know how, whether there's going to be some deeming provision that deems them to be aware of it. You mentioned that if, for example, a police officer stopping the motorist might be able to check on their phone, see that this motorist has an outstanding ticket, see that an electronic warrant has been issued, and then serve it. How would that service be done if it's on the officer's phone? These mechanical issues, so there are two really. How would the motorist know that a warrant has been issued electronically for their arrest, essentially, to be brought before the court, which is the purpose of the warrant? On how would it be served if it's in electronic form on a device? Those are my two questions there. The other question I have is a drafting question, and it relates to the amendment to the Justice of the Peace Jurisdiction Act to change the words "under the hand or hands of the justice or justices issuing the same" and substituting for those words, which are archaic, the words "in writing." Question I have is, the words "in writing" are often in various pieces of legislation defined in those pieces of legislation as including in electronic form. I don't know whether the Justice of the Peace Jurisdiction Act has a definition of "in writing" in it, or if it's in the Interpretation Act. Yeah, so I just wanted to get that clarified as to where that definition is to be found. Because if it wasn't in the Interpretation Act, then I think we ought to say, somehow signal where that definition is to be found when we put it into the Justice of the Peace Jurisdiction Act, to make sure that it is interpreted as meaning, as including written text in electronic form, which of course is the intention. So, yeah, so those are my questions, Minister, but we support the bill. Thank you.
Minister, first of all, the move to digitalizing
Member
the
from
court
St.
system.
Andrew Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please,
Minister.
Please, going forward, wait to be acknowledged prior to commencing your queries. We will now take questions from the member from St. Andrew Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, of course, the move to digitalizing the system is to be commended and future-proof in that sense. But I have to express a concern about the risks, the attendant risks, associated risks. The risk of cyber attack is exponentially increased the more reliant we become on the digital process. And my only urging to you and to the government in general, as we do that across agencies and institutions, is to ensure that the systems are robust and to ask if we are going to retain in any form the document so that in case there is a problem that is not quickly solvable, that the documents are nevertheless available, so that particularly in the court process where timing is consequential, misdate and all of that are serious consequences. What are the backup systems and redundant systems of redundancy that will be in place to safeguard the system?
Madam Speaker.
Hold on, member from St. James. I'm going to check St.
West
James.
Central.
West Central St. James. You may go right ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to lend my support to the bill entitled the Act to Amend the Electronic Transaction Act. It is indeed a short bill, and when passed into law will erase any doubt about the authority of the courts to do matters in electronic manner, including the keeping of the record. I note that the member from St. Andrew Southern asked the minister about how a person will know that the warrant has been issued and how it would be served. So a warrant is not normally served, it's executed. So in the same way that the officer would obtain the paper warrant as authority to proceed to apprehend the subject matter of the warrant, the electronic issuance is really the authority to proceed. It's not served on the subject matter, but it is executed. So that's the least of the challenges. Generally, you would only know that you were required to be in court and you would have missed the court. And depending on what is explained to the court may or may not act upon the authority to proceed to issue a warrant. But where it is issued, it is usually executed on the person. So, well, I think the system will enable an interface between the defendant, the motorist, and the officer to indicate, because they would have to be informed, of course, and there has to be an interface. I don't know the details of how it will be done, but what I do know is that a warrant is not generally served on someone, but it is executed by the authority. Yes. So, Madam Speaker, it is short, but it is another step in completing the process to enable the work of the government to be done with greater ease, utilizing the technology in this digital era. I had expressed the view that, you know, statutes continue to speak long after they are passed, and you have canons of interpretation. And so, under the hand of someone in an electronic age would have to be construed to mean what it would mean without leading to an absurdity in the digital age. But it is important that there is no doubt left as to the power of the courts to act on matters that are digitally presented. And just to say, indeed, within the definition section of the Interpretation Act, writing is defined there. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank
Right.
you,
Yes.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the member from St. Andrew South, St. Andrew Western, and St. James West Central for their input. Madam Speaker, we are getting into a new age that we just have to get used to change. Some time ago, Madam Speaker, I was in St. James speaking with the court staff. And I said, it won't be long when we get into a paperless system that you get receipt without paper, or you send a warrant without paper, and they say, no, the people of this country won't accept it. They want to see the paper. And there will be a transitional period, Madam Speaker, because it won't be long before when you pay at the court, you send a receipt on your WhatsApp or by, yeah. People don't get used to that. And indeed, Madam Speaker, the same with warrants to be issued. Just to say, in the beginning, Leader of the Opposition, the likelihood is that 1,000 warrants will be printed and will be available, sent to the police, and the police may well execute them. But there must come a time when we stop that. Because if it's in electronic form, the police officer should be able to have it on his phone, smartphone, or iPad, and say, this is the warrant issued by the court. Because ultimately, that's where we want to go. But I can tell you that the consideration now is that in the beginning here, we would, instead of writing up 1,000 and more warrants, we are going to generate using the printer the warrants. So they will be available in printed form. So that, but eventually, Leader of the Opposition, there will come a time when we don't need to print them. A police officer can have it on his smartphone and say, a warrant has been issued by the court. So I'm taking you in. And that will happen. Indeed, Madam Speaker, motorists who get a ticket, on the back of it is noted that if you fail to pay now within 30 days, and you fail to come to court 10 days, I think 10 days afterwards, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. So the tickets that are issued nowadays, Madam Speaker, actually has that on it to say that if you fail to pay within 30 days, 10 days after, and the date is put that you must go to court, and if you fail to go to court, a warrant will be issued. So that we are now just ensuring that what is on the ticket is actually done in accordance with the law. So to answer your question, though, Leader of the Opposition, we hope that all the warrants that are issued, we can put them on the website so that a police officer can pull them down, or the motorists can know that a warrant exists because you fail to pay and you fail to come to court. So we're hoping that will assist persons to know it's not that we want to arrest you. We don't even want you to come to court. We just want you to behave orderly on the road. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, there seems to be a little change because we have had less traffic accidents and less deaths on the road. But it's a far way to go, very far way to go. And this is a step, Madam Speaker, that I send to motorists. We don't want you to get any ticket. But if you get a ticket, for heaven's sake, pay them online or pay them at the tax office. And the reason why this has come, because it impacts Leader of the Opposition so much on the court system, which is the reason why I've decided to take it. Because if I don't get it done quickly, the courts are now working night court Saturday and Saturdays to deal with motorists who have violated the Road Traffic Act. And that is why it was so urgent, Leader of the Opposition, I decided to ask MSET to allow me to proceed with it. It has taken much longer because we had to, sort of collaborate as to what is needed, and the Chief Justice has indicated that it could have been much broader. But in discussion, and I want to thank the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel, especially the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, who worked in a lot of collaboration to see all that is needed was a simple amendment to the Electronic Transaction Act to allow the court to be able, using its rules and regulations, to be able to allow electronic recording, etc. So I want to thank the CPC, and just to respond to you, member, that this is a very important step in modernizing the court system. And so, member from Western St. Andrew, we are aware of the dangers. And that is why eventually when we get this integrated system where it becomes paperless, and as the member from St. Andrew South recognized, the courts, if you had to put all the paper in all the courts, you would need 10 rooms like this to collect all the records of the court. The hope is that we will digitize all of those records. Those over 20 years, I must tell you, after 20 years, they can be destroyed, or you want to keep those which are of some importance. But for every 20 years, for the last 20 years, we want to digitize all the records within the courts and just put all the records aside, but it's a monumental task, as you will appreciate. And member from Western St. Andrew, we hope to have not only the central database management, but the courts, central court system, and maybe also one in each parish court, so that if a record is destroyed in the parish court, we have it central or in the central management system. And I want to thank the member from St. James, West Central, who has indicated this point that in writing is really from the Interpretation Act to allow electronic signature and recording. So, Madam Speaker, thank you. And just to say that this is very important because it is now going to be a major change in the traffic courts, and we hope that motorists will comply and ensure that we have the ultimate aim is to have discipline and order on the roads. So, Madam Speaker, I now ask for second reading.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Electronic Transactions Act and to provide for connected matters, read a second time.
Thank you. The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Madam Speaker, before I put the clauses, I just would like to note that in clause 3, those small print where you see whole act and sections 7.1 should have been in the margins.
I'm about to ask you because
yes,
the provision is amending the schedule and inserting a new 4 to replace the 4 that's there, which is dealing with the procedure and the civil procedure rules.
Right.
And there are 2 columns in the schedule. One should say whole act. And then 5, you've added the new text for 5,
right,
but it doesn't say whole act.
No.
So
it should have been in the margin. Those small prints should have been in the margin.
It should have been part of the provision.
No, they should have been in the right side of the margin, the right side.
Well,
so what we're replacing item 4 in the Justice of the Peace Act?
No, I'm talking about in clause 3, you're amending the Electronic Transactions Act.
Right.
The schedule, the first schedule. The first schedule has 2 columns. Well, I'm just looking at the left-hand pages at the very back.
No.
I'm going off of that.
Right.
It has 2 columns. And in the case of item 4, you're not changing the right-hand column. You're changing the text in the left-hand column to say court proceedings or procedures except A and B. That's fine because the right-hand column remains the same. But you're adding a new 5 in the left-hand column, but it doesn't say what is to be in the right-hand column.
And that is where the small print to the left should have been in the right-hand column.
Right. I don't know how you fix that.
No, it was a typographical error. Sorry, it was a printing error.
Because the way it's written in the bill, it looks like a marginal note.
No.
Which is obviously not correct.
Bear in mind now, if you remember, we're removing clause 4 in the first schedule. And we're put in place of clause 4 and 5. So 4 relates to the whole act, and then 5, I think the CPC had pointed it out to me. CPC?
Items 1, 2, 3, and 4 all have whole act written beside them in the right-hand column, according to this page of the bill, the left-hand pages, which is supposed to represent what is in the act currently.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And the whole act should refer to all, to both 4 and 5.
Yes, but it doesn't
No, and
obviously
it's
do
because
so.
of the, it's because of the.
This is how it's been laid out.
That is correct.
Yeah, this is,
So I think the CPC did point out to me before I came in.
but how do you
that-
fix it?
Well, we're going to fix it by the whole act should refer to both 4 and 5. No, sorry.
I think they need to advise
Give
you
me
how
a
to
sec-
fix
give me a
it.
second. I think she
Yeah.
has sent.
Minister, in your discussions, you would have to complete indicating whether or not you will make an amendment and the nature of the amendment if you are so going to do.
Madam Speaker, I think the leader of opposition has pointed out very important. The small print is the right column of the first schedule. The reference to section 717C refer to items. So basically, the small print is the right column of the first schedule. So we are going to move.
Is that an explanation or is that an amendment?
No explanation.
So how are we going to deal with it in committee?
Member from, let me just.
So are they suggesting that this be?
No, it will be tidied up
In a
by the
lower-
time it gets to the Senate on Friday.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Very well, thanks. So, Madam Speaker, I now put clause 1. It's not an amendment, a typographical, a printing error.
We're going to pass it as is, and they'll fix it in the Senate.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I don't think it's typographical. It's not. No, it's a slip rule, so it does have to come back. It's going to be fixed. That's what we're doing, fixing it here. Yep, those small prints. The small prints, that's the whole act and section. Those. No, admittedly, and as a CPC say, please, it is a printing error. So it's been treated as a printing error here. And so it does have to come back when it's dealt with at the Senate. Okay? So you see those tiny, the tiny whole act, and it just should have been on the right-hand side. That's correct. Mhm. Okay, we put clause 1, Madam Speaker. Yes, okay. Proceed.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Put clause 2.
Clause 2.
I put clause 2. You are to put
Don't-
clause in a minister.
No, you are to put it, Madam Speaker. Clause 2. I put clause 2, Madam Speaker.
Those in favor? Those
put-
against? The ayes have it.
I put clause 3 with, I put
Printing
a correction to clause 3.
Printing correction.
With
Madam
the,
Speaker, procedurally, it's not the minister who puts the clauses. You need to put them.
that's right.
Yes. Yeah? He says what he wants to say on it, and then if it's not being changed, you put it.
So I put clauses 1, 2, and clause 4. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. As it relates
To
to
clause
clause 3,
we
the
ask-
indication from the minister was there is a printing correction
That's correct.
or slip error. Clause 3 will be placed without amendment and will be reprinted for issue to the Senate.
Correct.
It will not come back to the House. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. So clause 3 also passes without amendment. Minister, I now put title and enacting clause. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now ask the third reading. Go ahead. Third reading. Ask the third reading.
Before we ask a third reading, we're back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. The minister has asked that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Electronic Transactions Act and to Provide for Connected Matters, read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker.
Minister, where are we? Which act are we?
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of a bill entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2023, notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to take it through all its concluding stages.
Members before the House, the question is for the standing orders to be suspended to enable the minister to take the second reading of the bill, notice of which he gave earlier, and to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Those against? Those in favor? The ayes have it. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I stand here to commence the debate on the bill entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2023. The bill seeks to amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act, the FAA Act, the Principal Act, by repealing Section 48, capital C, subsection 1, subsection small c. This section of the FAA Act, Madam Speaker, forms part of the Fiscal Responsibility Framework, which was first enacted via amendments to the FAA Act in 2010 and amended several times since, with the objective of creating binding fiscal rules aimed at enhancing fiscal discipline and ensuring improvements in public financial management. Madam Speaker, I emphasize that these rules were enacted in 2010, 10 years ago, and we had particular economic and fiscal conditions at that time. Madam Speaker, no, first enacted in 2010. They were amended. No, the wage to GDP, the debt rule, and expenditure rule are all in 2010. Yeah, they just had different numbers and different target dates. So if you look back at it today, you'll see what we learned from our experience is that we were trying to move too quickly. And so when it came around to the 2013 and 2014 amendments, we gave ourselves a lot more time. Suffice to say, Madam Speaker, that the fiscal rules in Jamaica have three main components. One is the debt rule to get to a total debt to GDP ratio by a particular time. The other one being a fiscal balance rule, which is the balance that you need to achieve each year in order to achieve that debt objective, and an expenditure rule, which limits the ratio of wages paid by the government as a proportion of gross domestic product to 9%. Now, Madam Speaker, when we first began our reforms 13 years ago in 2010 and continued them in 2013, it was absolutely necessary to ensure that the growth in wages was constrained. Now, that requirement still exists. However, we have shown an ability to meet our fiscal targets. As I put up in a presentation only a few weeks ago, we have done so for, I believe, as a country, we have done so for, I believe, 8 consecutive years. Now, the expenditure rule of wages to GDP, we came very close to meeting prior to the pandemic, where we got to 9.1% of GDP. As has been explained recently, the way in which we measured wages did not take into account certain category of allowances that were included under programs. And some of those allowances amounted to as much as 1% of GDP. Some of them were not even taxable allowances. And so on a pre-tax basis, they would be slightly higher, 1.3% of GDP or thereabouts. Therefore, under the reform to public sector compensation, where we have streamlined compensation, we've gotten rid of a number of allowances. A number of them have been absorbed into salary. The wages and salary line is not a like-for-like comparison with what existed before. So a target of 9% would not make sense under a restructured environment. The question then becomes, okay, what is a target that makes sense? And rather than arbitrarily pick something, a better process would be to have a period of consultation prior to arriving at what should replace it. However, to have a situation where we have a rule that we are not meeting for whatever reason, and the reason I'm sharing with you, the primary reason is that the construction of compensation has changed considerably, and we have reallocated in the budget from programs to wages. So to have a rule that is not being met undermines the entire framework of our fiscal rules. And for transparency's sake, we're better off taking it out than having it and not meeting it for the reasons I mentioned. Now, there's a other side to this as well that recommends this approach. In sort of there's a fiscal trilemma, if I should use that expression, of trying to achieve sustainability, stabilization, and simplicity. And there's an argument that says that if you can achieve your fiscal target, not argument, is a fact. If you can achieve your fiscal target consistently, you will achieve your debt objective. Okay? You have a debt objective of, in our case, 60%, and you have to calculate the fiscal target each year. If you achieve that fiscal target each year, you will achieve your debt objective. Your expenditure target, or the expenditure target here, is about an allocation of expenditure within the fiscal envelope, or within the envelope of the fiscal target, i.e., it is a subsidiary target to the fiscal target. And we have demonstrated now for 8 years in a row well, it's actually it's 3 years under the prior administration and 6 years under this administration, not counting this one, which is not yet completed. So that's 9 years in a row. And we have shown ability to meet our fiscal target. Therefore, having the additional requirement, the downside of it is that it limits flexibility. However, that is the other side of that argument, is that if we don't have a means by which we can objectively decide on the level of wages that are appropriate for our economy and for the size of our economy at this stage, then we can compromise our own growth and development. Because we could pay our debt down if wages squeeze out growth-inducing capital expenditure or squeeze out support for social expenditure, then the development that we seek would not materialize. So, Madam Speaker, I was given a history of this particular expenditure target to say that it was first introduced to hit 9% of GDP by March 31st, 2016. And then that was extended to another year. And then there was another amendment passed, and it was extended to 2019. So there were 3 particular dates by which we should have achieved it. And Jamaica did not achieve it. And I've also added that even if we did, it would be a false sense of security because a big chunk of compensation was included under programs. So, Madam Speaker, we are tabling this 2-clause amendment to the FAA Act out of the desire and the need and the intention to be responsible and to be transparent, that the rules that we have on the books and the rules that we have in our laws are serious and should be observed. With a change in the compensation structure such that expenditure under programs is now under wages, it means that this particular rule with this particular number is no longer a reliable or applicable rule, and we must do away with it. We reserve, Madam Speaker, on coming back with another number and another date that we can agree and form a consensus with stakeholders on what ought to be achieved. But, Madam Speaker, that's within the context of realizing that the fiscal target is the primary one. So, Madam Speaker, I now do a clause-by-clause presentation of the 2 main provisions of the bill. Clause 1 states the short title and commencement, Madam Speaker, and addresses preliminary issues such as the name of the bill and provides that it should be read and construed as one with the Financial Administration and Audit Act, the principal act. Clause 2 states simply that Section 48, capital C, subsection 1, subsection common c is repealed. The Memorandum of Objects and Reasons sets out the reasons for the repeal of Section 48, subsection 1, subsection c. The government, Madam Speaker, does not intend with the passage of this bill to return to the days of elevated spending. That would be completely self-defeating. And even as we repeal this bill, I emphasize the importance that we attach to meeting our fiscal targets, Jamaica having met those fiscal targets for 9 years in a row. And meeting those fiscal targets is sufficient for us to arrive at our debt objective. Madam Speaker, I now invite members of this honorable House to support the passage of this bill.
Madam Speaker, the reasons outlined by the Minister of Finance are reasons which we accept. The one question I would have is about the time frame to come back to the House with a figure. I I understand the classification of wages and salaries because there are a number of allowances which were not classified before, which are now included. So the current number would not be relevant. The question is, are we coming back next year, as in not fiscal year starting April 1st, but the new financial year 24-25 with a figure? I would like to have a time frame as to when the minister intends to come back. Or is it that the government doesn't intend to come back to a wage to GDP target at all? I do accept the explanation about meeting the other fiscal targets of necessity would mean you have to have a particular wage to GDP. But I would like to know clearly whether the intention is to come back within a time frame or the intention is not to have this target at all.
Madam Speaker. Thank you. Madam Speaker, we're doing something fundamental today in the context of what Jamaica has been striving to achieve since 2013. Because the fiscal targets that were introduced into law in the 2014 amendment to the Financial Administration and Audit Act, one of them had been in the 2010 Act, which is the wage to GDP ratio. And the target in the 2010 Act was to achieve a 9% ratio by the end of March 2016. The other two in the 2010 Act were abandoned effectively by the then government when the IMF program hit the rocks. And those two were to achieve a fiscal balance of nil by the end of March 31, 2016. And secondly, to reduce the total debt to 100% or less of GDP by March 2016. Both of those targets were effectively abandoned by the program, along with the entirety of the program under the Bruce Golding administration. And when the Portia Simpson Miller administration assumed office, had to be renegotiated with the IMF. And the targets which now exist were put into the law in 2014. And those targets are the ones that both administrations have steadfastly sought to achieve in accordance with the law, with some amendments. I remember actually in the Senate, and it's kind of ironic really, as we seek to amend and eliminate one of the fiscal targets, the wage to GDP ratio. I remember the Minister of Finance, when he was then in the Senate, he was not in government at the time, he was in opposition, saying that the fiscal responsibility framework should be embedded in the Constitution, precisely so it could never be amended, other than through some constitutional.
Good evening. We have lost the feed. Good evening, viewers. We have lost the feed from Parliament, but at 8 p.m. Jamaica time, 9 p.m. US time, the Make We Talk program will be going live. Our special guest will be Senator Gabriela Morris. She's also the People's National Party Youth Arm President. She will be our special guest this evening. And the host is yours truly, Jeffrey Tavares. My co-host will be Wilfred Radigan. We'll be coming on live this evening at 8 p.m. Jamaica time, 9 p.m. US time. And the topic is young people says we don't know what to vote for. In other words, young people are saying they do not know what to vote for. So we're going to have Senator Gabriela Morris come on to speak to us about that. We have lost the feed from Parliament. I don't know what's going on. We have lost the current feed coming into us from the House of Parliament. But join us at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. US time. That's 8 p.m. Jamaica time or 9 p.m. US time. We'll be live with a discussion by Senator Gabriela Morris, President of the People's National Party Youth Arm. The topic is young people in Jamaica do not know what to vote for. They do not see or know what to vote for. That will be our topic this evening at 8 p.m. So join us then. Thank you. We do apologize for this. We do apologize for the break of transmission.